In our last episode, we witnessed God's profound faithfulness to Abraham, reaffirming his promise of a son, Isaac, the child through whom all nations would be blessed. While Abraham and Sarah wrestled with doubt and rejoiced in a miraculous promise, another branch of Abraham's family tree had taken root in a very different soil. Abraham's nephew, Lot, had chosen to dwell in the fertile, prosperous plains of the Jordan. His tents were pitched near the booming cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, cities infamous for their wealth, and even more so, for their overwhelming wickedness. For years, Lot and his family had lived in the shadow of this depravity, slowly, subtly, being drawn into its corrupting influence. This episode is a stark confrontation between God's holy justice and humanity's unrestrained sin. It is the terrifying story of divine judgment upon cities steeped in evil, a desperate rescue, and the tragic consequences of a heart clinging to a perishing world. It is fire from heaven. It was at Abraham's tent, after the miraculous promise of Isaac was reaffirmed, that the Lord revealed his solemn purpose. As two of the divine visitors, the angels, began to walk toward Sodom, Abraham remained standing before the Lord. And with a heart full of fear for his nephew Lot and his family, who he knew lived in that doomed region, Abraham drew near and began the most audacious negotiation in human history. He asked, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city?" This was not Abraham questioning God's goodness, but appealing to God's own righteous character. He knew God would not punish the innocent with the guilty. And the Lord, in his perfect justice and infinite patience, replied, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Emboldened, Abraham pressed on, his words a mixture of reverence and desperate humility. "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? He continued to plead with trembling voice for 45, then 40, then 30, then 20, until his final trembling plea, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there?" And the Lord, in a breathtaking display of mercy and justice perfectly balanced, replied, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." Through this incredible dialogue, God was not being persuaded by Abraham. He was graciously revealing his own just and merciful heart to his friend. He was demonstrating that he is not a capricious God who destroys indiscriminately, but a righteous judge who will go to any length to spare a city for the sake of even a small remnant of the righteous. The fate of Sodom now rested on finding just 10 righteous souls. As the sun set, the two angels entered Sodom. Lot, sitting at the city gate, saw them and knew at once they were not of that place. He recognized their holiness and understood the grave danger they were in. He ran to meet them, bowing low, and begged them, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go on your way early in the morning." The angels initially refused, saying they would spend the night in the square. But Lot insisted, knowing that to spend a night in the open in Sodom was to invite immediate trouble. He was a man living in a state of compromise, a resident of a wicked city, yet he was, as the New Testament tells us, distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless. His heart knew righteousness, but his actions placed him in the very heart of corruption. This is a critical distinction. In the eyes of God, Lot's righteousness was not rooted in his location or his flawless actions. He was clearly a man of deep compromise. Rather, it was rooted in his faith. Amidst a sea of paganism and depravity, Lot held to the belief in the one true God, the God of his uncle Abraham. It was this faith, however imperfectly lived out, that set him apart and made him worth saving. But before they had gone to bed, the unspeakable happened. The men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people from every part of the city, surrounded the house. The city's corruption was total. There were not even 10 righteous men to be found. They shouted at Lot, making a horrific demand to sexually abuse his angelic visitors. In his panic, Lot went outside and made a terrible, desperate offer. "No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." Lot's desperate plea reveals how his own moral compass had been warped by the city's depravity. He was trying to prevent one evil by offering another, demonstrating the subtle way compromise eats away at a soul. The mob, enraged, surged forward to break down the door. But the angels intervened. They pulled Lot back inside, shut the door, and struck the men outside with blindness. The scene descended into a terrifying chaos. A mob, now blind, groping for a door they could no longer find. A perfect picture of a people blinded by their own sin, relentlessly pursuing their own destruction. The angels then gave Lot the urgent command, "Get your family and flee. We are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it." Lot ran to warn his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. He told them of the coming destruction, but they thought he was joking. The culture of unbelief was so deep, they could not comprehend a reality beyond their own immediate pleasure and prosperity. They chose to stay, bound by their blindness. As dawn broke, the angels urged Lot again. But the scripture says he hesitated. Why? He was attached to his life, his possessions, his status in the city. The pull of the world was strong. He had invested years in Sodom, built his life there, prospered there. He was delaying, weighing his comfort against God's command. Seeing his fatal delay, the angels acted. They seized his hand and the hands of his wife and 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, the Lord being merciful to him. This was pure, unadulterated grace. Lot did not deserve to be rescued. He lingered, he compromised, he was a man torn between 2 worlds. Yet for Abraham's sake and by God's sheer mercy, he was literally dragged to safety. His salvation was not of his own strength, but purely an act of God's unmerited favor. Once outside, they gave one final solemn warning. Escape for your life. Don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, or you will be swept away. As the sun rose, the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah, from the Lord out of the heavens. He overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. It was a complete and terrifying deconstruction, a return to the formless void, a demonstration of God's just wrath against unrepentant sin. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. This was not a moment of idle curiosity. It was an act of longing, a heart still attached to the world of sin she was leaving behind. She was saved from the fire, but her heart remained in Sodom. She now stands as a permanent monument to the deadly danger of a divided heart, a warning that physical rescue is not enough if the heart remains in rebellion. Lot and his 2 daughters, the only survivors, found refuge in a mountain cave. But the story does not end with their physical rescue. The corrupting influence of Sodom had taken a far more insidious toll on their hearts. The fear, the isolation, and the depravity they had witnessed and endured had twisted their moral compass. Believing all humanity had perished and desperate to preserve their family line, Lot's daughters conceived a horrifying plan, seducing their own father and giving birth to sons who would become the ancestors of the Moabites and Ammonites, peoples who would become bitter enemies of God's covenant people. This tragic aftermath reveals the deep wounds inflicted by dwelling in a place like Sodom. Lot himself, though rescued, never truly recovered. The sin of the city had indeed corrupted the moral behaviors of his daughters, demonstrating that the wages of sin extend far beyond the initial act of judgment. Early the next morning, Abraham looked down toward the smoking plain. The judgment was complete. It is a sobering account of the severity of God against unrepentant sin. But it is also a story of his faithfulness to rescue the righteous, even a compromised and hesitating man like Lot, out of his great mercy and for the sake of his friend, Abraham. It is a solemn warning against loving the world, a world that is passing away. Next time, Abraham's faith will face its greatest test, a trial that would demand not just his intercession, but his own heart. The ultimate test of Abraham's faith, the binding of Isaac.